to the G.I. Joe panel. Whoa! I'm Michael Brown. Not that that's of any consequence, but you're not here to see me. Of course, you're here to see Mr. Larry Hama. Norton. Feister sees what happens. Feister, everybody. See, the thing is as a comic book reader for decades, we see you guys' names on the covers of the comics, but it took me forever to even know how to pronounce J.M. DeMatteis or whatever. Yeah, and so DeMatteis, yeah. And see, the thing is, and I was even villains in the comics. I didn't know what it was called. Forever, I thought it was the Sparrow, not Despero. So we need a pronunciation guide for names of creators and characters. I think it's a very sticky thing with me. I want to be able to be very accurate when it comes to that. But please welcome our panel, ladies and gentlemen. We're ostensibly talking about G.I. Joe today. And you guys are the guys to be talking about G.I. Joe, for goodness sakes. This guy. Wrote for 14 years, was it? Yes. On the original Marvel series, it was a 14-year run, early 80s to early 90s. Yeah, that's an amazing stretch for any creator on any book ever. If you guys know comics, you know that the turnover rate on some of these comics are crazy. So please, if you can talk about, each of you can talk about your involvement with the G.I. Joe process, not just the comic, but the movies and whatnot. Any insight you can give our crowd here.
Well, Larry invented it.
Yeah, Larry, please, take it away, sir.
We might as well sit out there.
Yeah, I know. I want to know what he says.
Well, why don't we just answer questions?
Yeah, we can do that too. I thought we'd warm up with a little bit of talk show stuff, but again, this is the first time I've ever done this sort of thing, so I don't know what we're doing. Does anybody have any questions at all for our? Go ahead and step up to the microphone so we can clearly, so we can hear you and on our recording here. Yeah.
Awesome, Mr. Hama. How did you get brought onto the G.I. Joe property? Essentially, how did you get started with it? What was your introduction to it?
Well, Hasbro went to Marvel because they wanted a comic book based on the new 3 3/4 inch figures. So they, you have to understand that at that time in 1981 or 82, toy or licensed comics were at the bottom of the barrel. Licensing, the licensing fee came off the top of the page rate. So that meant that they couldn't afford that, A-list or even B-list writers and artists, couldn't do them. So they went to every single writer on the contract list, and every single writer at Marvel turned it down. So then Jim Shooter went to every single editorial office, and he asked the editor, the assistant editor, and the interns, and anybody else who happened to be in the office if they wanted to write the book. And he started at one end of the office building, and he worked his way all the way through. And my office was the last office. I was an editor at the time. And every single person in the known universe had turned it down. And then he got to my office, and I said I'd do it. Because I'd been trying to get writing work from Marvel. Even though I was a full editor, nobody would give me any writing work. They said, well, you draw the stuff, you can't write. And so I was kind of desperate to get some writing work. The main reason for my wanting to get some writing work is that when I started drawing Marvel Comics in the early 70s, my page rate was $23 a page, full pencils. And I could barely do a page a day, which meant that I could go on and flip burgers at Mickey D's and made more money. And I noticed that the guy who was writing the book that I was drawing for $23 a page was making $50 a page, and he was knocking out 3 scripts a week. And I said, wait a second, he's making 180 times more than I am. And I said, plus at that time, the writer got a quarter of the pencils of the original art.
Oh, really? The writer did?
The writer, well, because the system was created by writers.
Oh, weird.
All the editors were writers. So they, so do the math. If you could write, 160 times faster than the guy, you're actually collecting more pages of original art
Yeah,
than the artist is,
that's nuts.
right? So I said, something's wrong with this situation. I want in on some of this action.
Yeah.
But they weren't going to let go of any of it, So that's, what it came down to. So I said, well, maybe this is a way to get my foot in the door. But every single artist and writer said, don't do it. Because once you do a licensed book, you're a pariah. That means you've you're a bottom feeder, and nobody will ever consider you for an A-list book ever again. And they were actually right. After I did G.I. Joe, I was never offered an A-list book while it was an A-list book at Marvel, period. I wrote Wolverine for 8 years. But when they gave it to me, it was on the verge of being canceled. And they figured, well, Hama can't mess it up any worse than it is. And so, a year later, both G.I. Joe and Wolverine are in the top 5 selling books in the country. And so I went back and I said, well, I'd like to try to write some other stuff. And they said, well, at first they said that I couldn't write any other stuff because I could only write the military stuff. Right? And then, after Wolverine was popular, they said, well, they're both like flukes. You can't, you're not, you're not the real thing, that's how it went, I got to write the Avengers because it was in a downward spiral. And it continues. I was not taken seriously as a writer for the entire run of G.I. Joe or Wolverine. I wrote G.I. Joe for 13 years. I wrote Wolverine for 8 years. And during that entire time, I was never invited to a single convention. And I never had a single write-up in any fanzine. I was totally ignored. So, but the thing is, I think a lot of the people would have been discouraged, but to me, it's a job,
Was it just the fans and our culture, or was it the companies as well that weren't? Because obviously you weren't getting what do you think impacted your not being able to write an A-tier book, or a book that would have been considered A-tier before you came onto it, obviously? Was it the fans that weren't giving you write-ups or inviting you conventions? Was it the companies not trusting their power because of the fans not inviting you?
A lot of factors is, I didn't cozy up to the writer cliques. I never considered myself a writer. I spent 15 years drawing stuff before they let me write anything. All my friends in the business are artists. hardly know any writers. I don't hang out with writers, you know. I don't have anything in common with them, for the most part.
Except for the writing part.
Yeah. But I don't write the way writers write. I think of the story as a series of visuals, sequential art, and I see that in my head. So I compose the entire story as a series of pictures. And then when I sit down at the word processor, I just describe that series of pictures. And that's what the artist draws. I write plots. I don't write full scripts. So the artist draws the series of pictures that I describe, and then I get back the pencil pages, and then I fill in the dialogue and the sound effects. I don't write captions. I don't write thought balloons. If I have captions, it's the next day in Oshkosh, or their first-person interior dialogue, with quotation marks. That's what I did with G.I. Joe, and everybody complained. They said, because at that time, 50% of what was on the Marvel Comics page was captions and thought balloons. He enters the room, darkly as ambient light, filters through the blah, 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 And it was usually just boring descriptions of what was already in the pictures. And I had this horrible experience all the time when I was drawing this stuff, where I would draw that, brilliant rays of sunlight streaming through the clouds and, illuminating the blah, 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 blah. And the writer would, sort of be working to fulfill his purpose as a writer and write like 5 captions, going, and as the ambient light, blah, 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 streams through the clouds, completely covering up what he was describing. And, that's not right,
So I love what you just said that. That's basically the idea in filmmaking. It's called show, don't tell. You don't have
Could you, I can't, I'm a little hard of hearing too.
I love what you just said, because in filmmaking there's a theory called show, don't tell. You don't have a character say, and now I'm going to fulfill my life's destiny. You just have them doing that. You show it. So, and I think that's what a lot of more modern comic book movies have kind of taken into it. There's less dialogue and there's more action. Do you think that do you think that the way you told your stories, which obviously revitalized comics that were failing or shows that were failing and made them popular again, do you think that you may have jump-started a trend?
No, I don't think the methodology of storytelling has as much to do with it as making everything character-driven. That when I was an editor, I would tell my writers and my artists, well, I don't care about the plot. The plot is just a sort of framework to hang these incredible characters that you want to know more about, and I said, well, look, like, you keep buying the Harry Potter books and you keep, watching, going to see the sequels, but, you're not doing that because you're saying, wow, the plot of that previous one was really killer. You don't even remember the plot. You want to hang out with Harry and Hermione, and it's those people are the ones that interest you, and that's the purpose of doing this stuff. And the guys that draw it, get it, I think, and the really good ones are endeavoring to put that on the page in, the way the characters act and, what you can feel through, the emotive powers. In the comic business, we refer to artists and we say things like, yeah, he does really good acting, and what that means is that they can convey stuff by facial expression and gesture, it's not just
Gritting teeth.
gritting teeth, or what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the artists, we're sort of always amazed at the guys that can do this, or the guys that can, or those types of gestures, and I think the rank and file of the readers that don't get a lot of that. But this is what you guys got to jump in and say something.
We got the best seat in the
When
house.
did I interrupt you? When Yoda's talking, you shut up and listen. I know the stuff that attracted me to comics. It was character, like you said. I knew how Ben Grimm or Johnny Storm or Peter Parker was going to react or behave in a given situation, and you could read, everything that Peter was thinking from the look on his face when, John Romita would draw that look of stun. You knew what he was feeling without having to read the captions, because I think a lot of kids started reading comics before we could read.
Yeah,
And the
that's for
pictures,
sure. That's for sure.
we would kind of figure it out. Like, he looks scared. I bet he's worried about what's going to happen. And, that's how my daughter is learning to read, because she's putting together the picture with the image and the words that she does recognize, and then she'll figure it out from there. And when you go to movies, you can watch a film without, that's how silent films work, is you can read the expressions on their faces. Yeah, there's the little dialogue card, but, without that performance there, the story's not going to work. I'm trying to think of, movies recently that have had, a minimal amount of dialogue, but managed to break your heart with performance.
The Artist.
There you go.
The Revenant.
I haven't seen that.
This gentleman's had his hand raised.
Go ahead.
But no,
I'm not going to mess with freelancer. Go ahead.
Just go up to the mic if you have a question.
yeah.
The question is about the October Guard. When you wrote that, it was in the 80s, the top of the Reagan era, evil empire, and you give us the counterpart of G.I. Joe that isn't bad. I mean, they're not really bad guys. They're just soldiers doing their job too. Did you get any pushback or anything from the higher-ups or anybody from that? Because I think they're really great characters.
Well, they pretty much let me do what I wanted. But my feeling is that I thought it was not right to do a military comic where you demonize the opposing force. When you do that, well, that's the product of propaganda during wartime. In order to convince the majority of people to kill other human beings, you have to convince them that the people that they're killing are not human. It takes a lot to do that. They have a thing in basic training called the spirit of the bayonet. Where they take you out on the bayonet range, and you keep stabbing these dummies while you're shouting "kill" at the top of your lungs over and over and over again. And this is basically to condition you to be able to do that, and not think about that thing, But I thought it behooved us to make the reader aware that the enemy has a face, and that they're human beings, and that's the inherent tragedy in the stories, Otherwise, it's just senseless violence. Otherwise it's just you're shooting at zombies in video games.
They were allies when I was working on it. So October Guard, by the time I got to GI Joe, the October Guard were friends of GI Joe, so they were on the same side.
You want to step up to the mic?
This was nice to see you, so appreciate you coming to Little Rock. This is like the only comic I ever collected religiously. And I think what really set it apart for me is at my son's age was the cartoon was so cartoony, but in the comic book, people could die.
Yeah,
there was violence.
That was the big thing for me when I was a kid, reading
Larry's it made it
book
legitimate.
This is because they had lasers in the cartoon because you didn't want to kill anybody, and I felt like I was reading something real because it didn't talk down to you. And I hear that a lot. When I was working on the book, I hear that it was everybody's first comic, and that's kind of cool, especially when you hear the trouble that he had working on it.
Well, was there any pushback that to try to make you do in the comic what would happen in the cartoon?
When I was working on it, they had a definite big time no violence. They actually came to us when I was working at Devil's Due. They came to us and asked us if it was possible for them to not have any guns in it.
Oh.
No, when we were doing the original run, you have to understand that the approvals person at toy companies and at movie studios or whatever is usually a 22-year-old girl fresh out of college. This is their first job, and they don't know anything about the it's like they would come on and they would be told, oh, there's 150 characters. And they're like, and so they're only looking at surface stuff, So they would have to approve the covers. They'd get this cover, and I remember one cover we had it was Lady J and Roadblock, and Roadblock had this giant 50 caliber machine gun. It's
awesome.
I think the first thing that goes through her head is large black guy with enormous gun. And I got this frantic message of, I think we're not going to have guns on the covers anymore. And I'm like, what?
Called G.I. Joe.
So,
I would have submitted a cover sketch of somebody digging a latrine.
Yeah, it's what can you do? They would get, a bug about something and overreact. Lots of times they would push on me to do this stuff, and I would just say, well, I quit.
Right.
And then they say, okay, wait, let's talk about it. And I pushed back on the death of Cobra Commander, and they wouldn't budge. And I said, well, okay, go ahead and do it. We lost 33% of sales after that. And I said, they started listening to me a little bit after that.
Where did Serpentor come from?
But I pushed back completely on the Dreadnoks. The Star Wars movie with the Ewoks had just come out, so they thought, let's have a plush element. So we'll have these characters that are cute, these cute teddy bears called the Dreadnoughts.
What?
You know?
They were supposed to be teddy bears?
Yeah, they were supposed to be these teddy bears, and then
The biker gang?
they weren't a biker gang. They were just these cute teddy bears called the Dreadnoughts. And I said,
I
you
never
can't
knew
have
that.
the good guys be shooting these cute teddy bear characters. And, because everything is driven by sales and marketing. They say, well, we need to have these cute teddy bears in there somehow. And I said,
As bad guys?
yes, as bad guys. And
Do you need to lay down?
I said, look, let's make them some nasty bikers.
Yeah. And became everybody's favorite characters.
That's how I pushed back. But
It's funny you say that, because didn't something like that end up in one of the cartoons? They grew there was this thing that started out as cute, then it grew up into this monster that Duke had to fight.
Space Station. The cartoon.
Yeah, they got their way, kind of.
I don't know if that's funny.
Did you guys have anything to do with the two movies? That's my last question. I'll throw
He
in.
was in it.
I was hired as a technical consultant on the first movie, and my consultancy consisted almost 99% of continually saying, Snake Eyes can't talk. Because they had written, the first two drafts of the script had Snake Eyes talking at the very end of the movie. And I said, what the heck is this? And I remember the producer, was saying, yeah, isn't that great? He's a character that doesn't speak, and at the end of the movie, he talks.
Like Silent Bob.
And I said, but he can't talk.
Yeah.
and the producer was like, yeah, but isn't it great? And I said, no, he can't talk. So, you have to choose your battles, and so at that point, I came to the realization that even though there was all this other stuff that I really didn't like, and it was really minor, compared to having the character that can't talk. So I said, well, I'm going to forget about, arguing about all this other stuff, because it's really inconsequential, and just only consistently say every day, Snake Eyes can't talk.
Well, you won that.
I won that. But, they did actually shoot the scene.
No, really?
They shot it.
Jesus.
Was Ray Park the one talking, or did the guy in the suit?
No, because he can't really talk.
I know, that's why I was asking. They had to overdub him in Star Wars. I was wondering if they
had to dub him.
Yeah.
Following up on the not talking theme, one of the best comics, in my opinion, in history was Silent Interlude. I was just wondering if you could talk about the development of that and how it shows the importance of sequential art in comics.
He's going to tell you the truth.
The truth of that is that one day the editor called and said, well, look, I think I lost a whole issue on my desk someplace, so we need to generate a complete issue in about 2 weeks. It's got to go to shipping. And 2 weeks, I mean, they allowed that for the lettering, So I said, well, if I write it and draw it simultaneously, that saves a lot of time. And then if we get this guy Steve Lealoa to do the finishes, he's really fast. And if there's no dialogue, there's no lettering in it, we save like a week and a half we don't have to send it out to the letterer and wait for it to come back. So I said, okay, I'll write it and draw it, and there'll be silent. There'll be no no lettering on it. And I delivered it in 3 days. About seven.
That's crazy. 22 pages in 3 days?
Yeah.
Is that what you did? Fantastic.
But
That's
I can,
fantastic.
you know, but I've been working in doing storyboards for years, and you know, this is what we did at Neil Adams Studio, Continuity. They never give you a storyboard job unless it's due the next day. You know, you get the job at 3 in the afternoon, and they want it at 9 o'clock the next morning. So we were used to just working all night and just getting it all done. And if you're working in Neil Adams Studio, you have to. There's a bar that's like up there. You have to be able to really draw the stuff, and you can't be making excuses. So that was a real education for me, like learning how to do it that way. I did breakdowns, right on the page. I don't do little thumbnails. I don't do whatever. I draw directly on the page. I went through the entire 22 pages, and I drew in the panels. And the way I do it is like, okay, he's at the top of the tower and he's working his way down. I want 3 vertical panels. Didn't know what was in the panels, but I just knew, the basic size. Okay, there's going to be a fight here between these guys, but the action will be horizontal. So I'll have I'll stack 3 horizontal panels there, So even though I didn't know what the story was, I knew what was required for the storytelling. And I ruled all the panel borders. Then I went back and roughed in the entire story, in terms of what I needed for the action, 22 pages. Then I went back to the beginning and tightened everything up. I've always worked that way. I just did 22 pages of layouts for Deathstroke. Took 3 days. That's about the time it takes me to do it. I never tell the editor that it takes me. Oh, it's going to take at least 10 days. And then I'm pushing it, But
That's fun.
Every job expands to fill the amount of time you got to do it. If you have to get it done in 3 days, then you can get it done in 3 days.
It's funny you say, because when he asked that question, because I knew the story behind the 21, and it was such a big influence on people our age, because we saw that and we was like, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And that's why we asked you and Zach to do it again on our series. When we did that, we made our 21 a silent issue too, and we wanted to basically be the sequel. But it was because we thought that was amazing. That was such the peak of storytelling, not that it was trying to get it in on time, and just being a good storyteller, in general. So
I don't know, I assume you feel the same way, but I've heard you tell the story before, and every time you say how you came up with that book, for me, and maybe for you, it's like saying, I wrestled a grizzly bear, then I built a tower, and then I walked to the moon.
The logistics behind it, yeah.
Yeah.
But him describing the way he does the story is exactly how I do Battle Pog and stuff like that. It doesn't.
Really?
Yeah, I draw out the panel borders and stuff, and then I'll have to fill those in because I'm thinking of pacing in my head, not necessarily the actual things that are going to happen.
Well,
It helps you to it keeps the pages consistent.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Because you're not doing blinders and looking at one panel.
Yeah,
And then
yeah, yeah.
just noodling the crap out of one panel, and then you get to the next one and you go, well, I gotta make it somehow match up.
Yeah,
And then you're
there's
stuck.
less painting yourself in corners that way, although it
Yeah.
does seem like you're going to do that.
And also, I don't know what's on page 22 until I get to page 21.
That's amazing.
That's
I do it page by page. Nobody believes that I do it this way.
I believe it. I just not easy
'cause
for
I
other
like
people
to
to
be
do.
I like to be surprised.
By yourself.
Yeah. I mean, lots of times I read something, I get to page 3 and I go, oh, I know how I completely telegraphed, But if I don't know how to,
You're not going to know.
Yeah, the reader isn't going to know either, I got to page 15 or something in number 21, and I realized, both of these characters got their sleeves torn. Maybe I could do something with that.
That's how the tattoo happened?
Yeah, so I said, well, what if they had the same tattoo? What can I use for a tattoo? And I figured, well, when
I didn't know
Iron
that.
Fist back in the 70s, I designed this character called Lei Kung the Thunderer, and I put this big medallion on his chest with the I Ching hexagram.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, the reason I chose that hexagram back then was that it was alternating broken and solid lines, and I could remember that. It wasn't some symbol that I'd have to keep looking up.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, when you have to draw a character over and over again, like, I would be the last person to design a Spider-Man suit the way it's designed. It's like, I've always complained about it.
How many people have you told that story to who have that tattoo just go like this?
Well, the amazing thing is, what I don't tell people is when they come up and show me the tattoo, and I realize that it's upside down.
It's amazing because something that for you was just I'm going to throw this in. The hundreds of hours that my friends and I spent before that story was told, trying to decipher what that was, what did it mean, and we all had fan theories of, and I'm sure every little boy in America who's reading.
Well,
G.I.
I had
Joe,
no idea why they had that same tattoo at that time. I got to, 4 issues later when I had to do the origin, I had to think it all up. Why do they have that same tattoo?
Now I have a good question, everybody. I have to tell one quick story. I met Mr. Hama when I was 11 years old. My mom got me a tour of Marvel Comics. And at the end of the tour, when we first got there, we were told we weren't going to meet any of the artists or writers because everybody worked from home. And so I was immediately disappointed. And at the end of the tour, my mom mentioned to this woman that I was a big fan of G.I. Joe. And she said, Larry Hama's in his office. Let me see if he'll see you for a minute. So they walked me back to his office, and it was like a shoebox, but like any place you could have papers or books stashed was just stuffed with stuff. And he gave me a copy of G.I. Joe #1 and signed it for me. I still have it. And just started handing me comics. And then he told me who the killer of the Hardmaster was. And
Just immediately spoiled a comic for you.
well, but here's the thing. He swore me to secrecy. This is the days before the internet. And so I knew who the killer of the Hardmaster was it was like a year. And I never told anybody. So he spent a few minutes of his day.
Wait a minute, did you know who
changed
killed him,
my
or
life.
were you just trying to figure it out as this kid asked? You just had to think it up when the kid asked you.
But that's it. That was my question. Was you just making something up for
Who
this?
killed the Hardmaster? Oh.
Well, you don't think of these things until somebody asks.
It could have just as easily.
That's not a denial. That's funny.
And there's no Santa Claus.
When you guys are working either in drawing the G.I. Joe or writing it, exactly how much leeway were you able to do? Was Hasbro handing you characters, or were you able to actually give characters to Hasbro? Or
he made up quite a few, right? You made up a bunch of them.
Well, I would make up a character if there was a vacuum.
Right.
I mean, when I sat down to do the first issue, I looked at all the model sheets and I went, wait a second, there's not a single Cobra that has a face.
Yeah.
And, what we call agents of expression.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do acting when you've got characters with no facial features. So I said, okay, I got to throw in some Cobra character that is going to have expressions so we can tell what's going on. So I said, well, might as well make her a babe. And hey, let's put her in a complete black leather outfit.
Yeah, why not?
And so that's how, I came up with the Baroness, and then, they looked at that first issue at Hasbro and said, well, we should actually do a figure, which went against the grain, because they were always reluctant to do female figures, They did Scarlet, grudgingly.
Yeah.
And because the wisdom was, if it's a guy, it's an action figure. If it's a girl, it's a doll.
Yeah.
And no 10-year-old boy is going to pay money to buy a doll.
I couldn't wait to throw down money for the Baroness. She was hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really, there was something really weird because the Scarlet figure looked kind of dumpy.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, but then they came
That's
out
right.
with the Baroness, who was one of the bad guys, and she was totally
They sculpted
hot.
her figures skinnier. That's weird.
Yeah, it was very strange, I thought.
We made up quite a few in our run, but we were also very limited in what we could and couldn't do with characters as well.
Right.
There were several that we made up for the run. I think they've all been made into figures now. Most of those were Josh Blaylock's creations, but I think Tim Seeley did a couple of them. But yeah, we mostly just updated a lot of the old ones.
That's cool. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, please, go up to the mic.
Well, I asked this question to Mr. Hama earlier. Mr. Feister, Mr. Norton, what was your introduction into the G.I. Joe comics? I'm assuming it's not as depressing as just having someone walking down.
And no, I bought the comic when it came out, and I was crazy about ninjas fighting in battles. That was pretty cool. I was big into figures. I got the figures first. I was growing up in Tennessee and went to Service Merchandise and saw these action figures, and I was like, what are these? So I bought them all up, and Gung Ho was my favorite, and he never got enough play in the comic, I thought. Roadblock was my second favorite. And then the comic came out, and like I said, it didn't talk down to you like the cartoon did, so I was a big fan for a long time. That was it.
Not too different. Christmas morning of 1982, I think it was. I came downstairs and my mom had gotten me basically an instant G.I. Joe collection. I had all but one figure. I had all but one figure. I was an only child, and she had guilt over stuff, I assume. But I had a tank. I had a Jeep.
Oh man!
I had the jetpack.
I didn't have any of the vehicles.
Mobile missile command unit.
Wow!
It was.
You were the kid we hated.
I know.
You're the kid down the street everybody hates.
I never had an aircraft carrier. If that makes you feel any better.
Oh, my brother got that.
Yeah. Well, then be quiet.
No, I did. It wasn't mine.
But,
He wouldn't let me touch it.
So I had an instant G.I. Joe collection, and then at some point I caught a commercial for the comic book.
Oh, right, they had the commercials
Yeah.
on TV for comics back then. You never see that now.
And so I went and got that, and I was apparently an excessively stupid child because I didn't realize that comic books came out once a month. So I would ride my bike to Mr. Food every day. And the poor people who worked there were bothered by this child who was asking for G.I. Joe every day. And this went on for months before someone finally, took me aside and was like, listen, kid, it's every month, not every day. So go away. And then, of course, at some point my mom got me that oversized Treasury Edition G.I. Joe, which, I was hooked for life. It was amazing to me. G.I. Joe took over up until G.I. Joe came out, Star Wars was everything.
Yep.
And then you get these figures where the elbows and the knees move.
Yeah.
I don't think I bought a Star Wars figure again after that. G.I.
Guns
Joe
look like guns.
Yeah. And my friends and I, we would, our moms took us to the Army Navy store and we got camo and we went out and played G.I. Joe every day.
Immediately lost them in the woods.
Oh no, the figures didn't come with. Although I got the remember the glider, the styrofoam glider. Yeah, it lasted about an hour.
Yeah. Bye. You might as well have just said bye.
How do I get this on the roof?
Yeah,
Oh,
I lost
there you go.
some. So many are gone. They're probably still out in the ditch behind my house somewhere in Jackson.
But yeah, so it's G.I. Joe took over my world, and it was the gateway drug to comics.
Yeah, that's what I hear
Everything
all
else
the
that
time.
followed. I don't know what I would be doing if it weren't for that guy.
Look what you did.
Yeah, I would be the least productive salesman for Xerox if it weren't for Larry
Because
Hama.
you go home and play G.I. Joe.
Well, no. If
Watch out for the Xerox guy that plays with G.I. Joe figures.
Yeah, it's the at the risk of embarrassing him, the man is he's created an industry. He's created a life for a generation of guys my age and older, and it's an amazing accomplishment.
Whoa.
Thank you. I
We've
would
just
still
got a
rather
few-
have been drawing ducks.
We've just got a few minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions? Because we can vamp up here for another 4 minutes before. Please come up to the mic and let us know what your thoughts are.
Just really quickly, I think I read recently that IDW announced that G.I. Joe, Transformers, and something else are going to be part of the same universe. What are your thoughts on that?
I just heard about that. You were the last person to work on it, so you'd know more than I would, wouldn't you? You worked on the IDW one, didn't you?
Yeah, I did all the covers on Origins and then some of the other books. I know as much as you do.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the My Little Pony Cobra crossover is
That'll be fantastic.
amazing.
And Rom?
You know what? I'm dying to do a ROM cover. I would love to get back to do more G.I. Joe covers because there are so many characters I didn't get to draw yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is all instigated by the success of the Marvel and DC franchises, where they realize, if we do a Captain America movie and a Spider-Man movie and then a Thor movie, and then we could all lead up to the Avengers and have them all be, and have all these different audiences all sort of converge, and it's this great sort of expanded universe, and Hasbro thought, we've got
all this.
You know, we've got this Transformers thing, and then we've got this G.I. Joe thing, and we've got whoever else. And let's put them all together. And
I do.
There was a G.I. Joe and Transformers crossover.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a no-brainer.
I do want to see My Little Pony in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brony Force.
Brony Commandos. To follow up on that, all three of you, what's your opinion on the crossovers between toy continuity, I guess, between Transformers G.I. Joe, Transformers Lego, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, etc.?
Fun. It's fun. I don't really think about it much. I mean, the Joe stuff when as a kid and I read the first G.I. Joe Transformers, I was like, that's not right. They're robots. But then I grew up and I was like, that's fun. That's silly fun. So I don't really, put Garfield in there for all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 10-year-old kid has got a very different idea of what realistic means.
Yeah, exactly.
My daughter is 6, and so on any given day in her Millennium Falcon playset is a pony, several Star Wars figures, and Littlest Pet Shop,
Oh,
and
we would have
superheroes.
made so much fun of her.
She'd kick your ass.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying I wouldn't cry after. That's just how it would have started, Tom.
I mean, it's not very well known that even from the beginning, I got a lot of mail from girls. Because the logical extension is that any reading material that comes into a household is generally read by every kid in the household. If your brother buys something, you end up reading it.
Yeah.
If your sister buys something, you end up reading it. When I was a kid, I would go visit my girl cousins, and they would have stacks of comics, but they had girl comics. They had like Archies and Little Lulus and Harvey comics. I'd read them. If they came over to my house, they'd read my Supermans and Batmans and whatever. So I would get these letters from girls that say, I read my brother's G.I. Joe comic, and what I really like about it is that the girls aren't treated any differently, and they're not running around with their palms nailed to their foreheads, and they're not taking showers all the time like they do with the X-Men.
That's right. It was an awfully showery comic.
They were always taking showers.
Yeah, they were for a while.
Yeah.
Mutants sweat more.
Yeah. So, that sort of, woke me up a little. I said, well, there's this whole potential, audience out there that they're sort of ignoring. And whenever I went to, the suits at Marvel, I said, we should do more product for girls. And they would say, well, girls don't read comics. And I said, in the 50s, girls were 50% of the market. Literally. And, Marvel started out, when Marvel started out, half the line was romance comics. And that even, big honchos like Jack Kirby did a tremendous amount of romance stories. Johnny Romita started out doing romance. All their top guns worked on the romance lines. Night Nurse, all that stuff. And somewhere along the line, they just decided, arbitrarily it seems, and and they would tell me, oh well, we tried a Barbie comic and nobody read it, and I say, well, yeah, but it sucked. If you did something that was good, girls would buy it, and I guess I was proven right. And when you go to a bookstore and you see all these girls like sitting in the manga section, reading the manga. It's the market is there, but the big two still. I think finally DC got the message.
Yeah.
First,
they're getting
They have a new, I was just telling Larry about this yesterday, called DC Superhero Girls, that's aimed at,
It's very good. Yeah. I've seen
Yeah,
it.
and my little girl is just gone. She's ready to buy all of them and dress up as them, and they're not damsels in distress. They're all effective and engaged and intelligent young women who are present and in leadership roles in whatever the crisis might be. And it's a really smart thing, and it's stuff that before I had a daughter, I never really thought about. Like, I thought I was like an enlightened guy, but now I have a daughter, and I'm noticing things that I didn't used to pick up on before. And I'm thrilled to death that she's coming along at a time that these things are out there. But Larry was telling me yesterday he even pitched an idea to Marvel over a decade ago that was basically the same kind of thing, that they shot it down. It's a mistake. It's a loss.
It's bad when you're ahead of the curve and everybody else is having to run to catch up with you. Folks, unfortunately, we have to draw the panel to a close. Time flies when we're having fun. Please put your hands together for our three fantastic panelists. And you guys are going to be out there. They can visit with you and whatnot as well. Yes. A franchise builder, Larry Hama, and Tom Feister, and
Feister.
Again, with the wrong name. Despero. I don't know.
Anything but Fester.
Yeah.
I got
And Mike Norton, ladies and gentlemen. A big hand for our guys. Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. Nice to meet you as well. Thank you very much. Take care. All right, guys.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.